There is a specific kind of isolation that hits when you are staring down a crisis completely outside your control. Pray for the diagnosis to reverse, for the bank account to fill, for the heartbreak to end. You ask for a direct intervention, and you get absolute silence in return. This friction usually comes from the transactional pragmatist mindset, the habit of treating prayer like a cosmic vending machine, where a specific request should trigger a guaranteed product. When the product fails to drop, the logic breaks down. The user assumes either the machine is broken or they simply pushed the wrong buttons. This comparison matrix shows where that logic fails. While our cultural expectation focuses on changing circumstances and eliminating hardship, the reality of the practice centers on changing character and reframing that hardship. Daily prayer functions as a rigorous discipline of internal transformation, moving the focus away from external manipulation. As C.S. Lewis often articulated, the act of praying is designed to alter the person doing the praying, rather than changing the divine will. True prayer starts the moment you abandon the demand to control your environment and accept the difficult work of letting your character be reshaped. To understand how that reshaping happens, we have to look at the internal shifts the practice requires. The first involves moving from isolated self-sufficiency toward a divine relationship. This requires a specific input, setting aside dedicated, daily time to actually speak and listen to the divine, rather than passively reading about faith or thinking abstract thoughts. By doing this, you foster a direct relationship that tethers you to a transcendent purpose, something much larger than your inbox or your daily problems. The cost of this connection is your ego. You have to sacrifice the illusion that you are entirely self-sufficient and admit you are not the center of the universe. That brings us to the second shift, moving your focus away from personal gain and toward deep, intentional humility. The practice of nishkam focuses on connection for its own sake, stripping away the transactional demand for a specific favor or reward. This chart maps the psychological returns of different types of prayer. Ego-focused and ego-less practices are plotted against subjective well-being. Notice the high well-being quadrant. The data shows ego-less prayers, specifically adoration and thanksgiving, consistently yield significantly higher psychological well-being. To get that return, you have to actively suppress the urge to treat the divine as a wish granter. For a highly results-driven mindset, this feels intensely unproductive at first. By removing your ego from the request, the practice builds the specific mental architecture required for long-term emotional stability.
Faster, clinical. That internal shift physically alters your brain chemistry, particularly in how you handle impulses and temptation. The third shift involves overcoming temptation by intentionally aligning your will with God's before you ever enter a high-risk environment. Neurologically, this activates your prefrontal cortex, the region governing emotional regulation. It provides the crucial cognitive pause required to evaluate an impulse instead of blindly reacting to it. The trade-off is steep. This requires daily, honest confession. You have to confront your flaws, which is deeply uncomfortable. The fourth shift applies this to navigating difficult life decisions, moving from mental confusion toward clarity. It starts with the silence first rule. Before you speak a single word of prayer, you sit in 10 to 15 minutes of absolute stillness to gather yourself. This logic model shows the physiological impact. Left, constant noise keeps your cortisol high. Right, 10 minutes of silence engages your parasympathetic nervous system. Reaching this parasympathetic state clears mental fog, allowing for regulated, wise choices. Carving out that absolute silence is agonizing in a hyper-connected world. It requires fiercely protecting your boundaries and turning everything else off. The fifth and final shift involves moving from despair toward finding strength when you have hit your absolute limit, through grief, trauma, or critical illness. Across centuries and cultures, when humanity hits the edge of its own capacity, this is where it turns. Deep crisis prayer triggers serotonin release and increases gyrification, the actual folding of the cortex. This creates more surface area for the brain to process information, govern emotions, and form the memories needed to integrate trauma. While the external rescue you are begging for may never arrive, these neurological changes provide the biological infrastructure for endurance. By physically altering how the brain handles high-stress input, prayer enables a practitioner to remain cognitively clear and find a sense of purpose, even when they have zero power over their surroundings. How you apply this depends on your current specific friction with the practice. If you are the crisis navigator, overwhelmed, exhausted, and feeling like you aren't worthy to pray correctly, stop trying to craft perfect theological sentences. Your starting action is the simplest, most honest cry of surrender you can muster. This path requires letting go of the attempt to control the outcome of the crisis, trading that control for peace. If you are the transactional pragmatist, you likely feel prayer is a waste of time because your problems aren't disappearing.
The measurable return for a pragmatist lies in long-term resilience, providing the capacity to handle friction that doesn't simply disappear. That resilience measurably decreases your baseline anxiety and boosts your tolerance for the daily friction of life. Finally, if you are the spiritual optimizer, stuck in rote mechanical repetition, shift away from obligatory reciting. Move toward transformational, relationship-building practices like adoration and mindfulness. For all of us, the final transition involves viewing prayer as an exchange of jurisdictions. Giving up the demand for personal gain is simply the cost of granting terrestrial license for celestial interference. By giving up the illusion of control, your reward is the quiet strength and resilience to boldly face a world completely out of your hands.